Let's talk about the looming US government shutdown, a phrase you've probably heard tossed around in the news. But what does it really mean, and why does it keep happening? Every few years, it seems like the country is on the brink of grinding to a halt, with politicians pointing fingers and Americans left wondering how it all got so complicated. This isn't just another headline or a bit of political drama. It's a recurring crisis that threatens to disrupt the lives of millions of people across the country. The government shutdown is more than just a buzzword. It's a real event with real consequences, and it's about to hit again. In just 6 days, if Congress can't come together and pass a budget, federal agencies will be forced to close their doors. That means everything from national parks to passport offices could go dark, and thousands of government workers might be sent home without pay. This isn't just political theater, it has real consequences for millions of Americans. Federal employees, contractors, and everyday citizens who rely on government services all feel the impact. Imagine planning your life around a paycheck that might not come, or needing a government service that suddenly isn't available. Think of the government like a giant household. Just as a family needs to agree on how to spend its money to keep the lights on and food on the table, Congress needs to approve a budget to keep the country running smoothly. When lawmakers can't agree, the whole system stalls. Right now, Democrats and Republicans are locked in a bitter standoff, each side refusing to budge on their priorities. The debates are heated, the negotiations tense, and compromise seems further away than ever. It's become a high-stakes game of chicken, with both parties daring the other to blink first. But the stakes aren't just political, they're personal, affecting families, businesses, and communities across the nation. The odds of a shutdown? About 78%. So this isn't just a remote possibility. It's a looming reality that experts and everyday Americans alike are bracing for, watching the calendar and hoping for a last-minute deal. At the heart of the fight are some of the most controversial federal agencies, like the IRS and the EPA, lightning rods for political debate that reflect deep divisions in the country over what government should and shouldn't do. Shutdowns don't just cost billions of dollars, they disrupt lives, stall important projects, and even damage America's reputation on the world stage. Yet, despite the high price, we find ourselves here, again, teetering on the edge. It's political dysfunction on full display, with lawmakers unable to find common ground, and the rest of us caught in the crossfire waiting to see what happens next. At the heart of the latest political standoff in Washington lies a fierce debate over the future of the Department of Homeland Security. The core dispute? It's all about funding for the Department of Homeland Security and Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, two agencies that have become lightning rods in the national conversation about safety, immigration, and civil rights. Republicans are pushing for increased budgets and expanded authority for these agencies, arguing that strong border security is not just a policy preference, but a fundamental necessity for protecting the nation from threats both foreign and domestic. But Democrats are sounding the alarm after 2 recent fatal shootings involving federal immigration agents. These incidents have sparked outrage and renewed calls for sweeping reforms, with activists and lawmakers alike demanding answers and justice for the victims. For Democrats, these tragedies are not isolated events. They point to a troubling pattern of unchecked power and a lack of transparency within federal law enforcement. They insist that before any new funding is approved, there must be real accountability and meaningful change. Their demands include strict oversight, new rules to govern the conduct of agents, and independent investigations into past abuses. They argue that without these safeguards, simply increasing funding could make existing problems even worse. On the other side, Republicans refuse to consider any cuts or conditions on Homeland Security funding. They warn that weakening these agencies would leave the country vulnerable and accuse Democrats of playing politics with national safety. The result is a bitter standoff, with both parties deeply entrenched, one side prioritizing security and enforcement, the other demanding oversight and reform. With neither side willing to compromise, the government is now barreling toward a shutdown, threatening to disrupt vital services and leave thousands of federal workers in limbo. As the deadline looms, the stakes couldn't be higher. It's a collision of priorities, security versus accountability, and the clock is ticking for Congress to find a way forward. Democrats, led by Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, have drawn a hard line in the ongoing debate over Homeland Security funding. Their message is clear. There will be no blank check for the Department of Homeland Security, especially when it comes to agencies like ICE and Border Protection. Schumer and his colleagues insist that simply approving more money without meaningful changes is not an option. They argue that funding ICE and Border Protection without comprehensive reform is essentially endorsing a system that, in their view, is deeply flawed and in need of urgent repair. Democrats point to years of reports about abuses, lack of transparency, and a system that fails both immigrants and border communities. Their demands are not just about money. They want to see real accountability and change. Specifically, they're calling for independent oversight of these agencies, stricter rules for federal agents, and transparent investigations into any allegations of misconduct. They believe that only with these safeguards in place can the public trust be restored. The recent deaths in Minneapolis have become a rallying point, seen by many Democrats as symptoms of a much deeper, systemic problem within law enforcement and immigration policy. These tragedies have fueled calls for reform and heightened the sense of urgency. Grassroots pressure is mounting, with activists and community leaders demanding that lawmakers refuse to fund these agencies without first ensuring accountability. The message from the streets is clear: no accountability, no funding. This groundswell of public activism is shaping the Democratic strategy in Congress. Inside the Capitol, Democrats are using the threat of a government shutdown as leverage to force a national conversation, one that many Republicans would rather avoid. They see this moment as an opportunity to push for reforms that have long been stalled. Democrats say they're willing to risk a partial government shutdown if that's what it takes to demand real, lasting change. For them, the stakes are too high to back down now. Their message to the country is simple but firm: fix the system, or the government stays closed. They believe that only by taking a stand now can they force the reforms they see as essential. It's a high-stakes gamble, but Democrats believe the principle is worth the risk. For them, this is about more than politics. It's about justice, accountability, and the future direction of the country. For Republicans, this is all about border security, non-negotiable. Led by Speaker Mike Johnson, they insist on full funding for Homeland Security and ICE. They see democratic reforms as weakening law enforcement and threatening national safety. Their base demands a tough stance on immigration, and they're not backing down. Republicans passed their funding bill in the House and expect the Senate to follow. They reject splitting the bill or negotiating separate DHS funding. Their message: fund security or face chaos. It's a political and ideological line they refuse to cross. The Senate is where everything stalls. The House passed the funding bill, but the Senate's filibuster rule means 60 votes are needed. Republicans have a majority but need 7 Democrats to advance the bill, an impossible ask right now. Democrats are united in opposition as long as DHS funding remains unchanged. The result: a legislative logjam, with no path forward. Some suggest splitting off Homeland Security funding to avoid a full shutdown, but Republican leaders refuse. The all-or-nothing approach leaves no room for compromise. The clock is ticking, and a shutdown looks almost certain. Congress is stuck, and the country is left waiting. The last shutdown, in 2025, lasted 43 days, the longest ever. Hundreds of thousands of federal workers went unpaid, causing real hardship. Essential employees worked without pay. Families struggled to make ends meet. The economic impact rippled nationwide. Businesses lost customers, parks closed, and markets grew volatile. Billions were lost in productivity and economic activity. The shutdown was a national embarrassment, exposing deep dysfunction. Yet, just a year later, we're on the brink again. Politicians seem to have forgotten the pain and chaos it caused. It's a cycle of crisis with no lessons learned. If there's no deal by Friday, a shutdown begins, but not everything stops. Essential services, military, air traffic, law enforcement keep running, but without pay. Non-essential government work halts, passport processing, social security, research, and parks all shut down. Federal workers are furloughed or forced to work unpaid. Everyday life is disrupted. Delays, closures, and uncertainty spread. The economic damage grows as contractors lose business and consumer confidence drops. Billions are lost, all due to political gridlock. The public pays the price for leaders' stubbornness. Congress faces a tight deadline, midnight January 30th. Legislative procedures are slow and time is running out. A major snowstorm just canceled a day of Senate votes, shrinking the window even further. Lawmakers now have only 4 days to reach a deal, write legislation, and pass it through both chambers. The compressed timeline raises the stakes. Any delay could guarantee a shutdown. Staffers are scrambling, and leaders are locked in tense negotiations. The question, will fear of blame force a last-minute compromise? Or will both sides dig in, letting the government close? The country waits, anxious, as the deadline approaches. The outcome is uncertain, and the consequences are real. You might wonder, does a shutdown really affect you? If you're a federal worker or contractor, it's the difference between getting paid or not. Even if you're not, the ripple effects hit your local economy. Less spending, more stress. Trust in government erodes, making it harder to solve bigger problems. America's global reputation takes a hit too. Shutdowns don't save money. They cost billions, all paid by taxpayers. It's a pointless, damaging exercise in political theater. When the government shuts down, so does a piece of the country's stability. That's why it matters to everyone. The stakes are real, and the cost is shared by all.